And we're back in the studio like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending this late Friday night here with me in New York. I want to point out before I do the rest of this stuff, this will be the second latest. It's about 11:20 p.m. Friday night. The latest I ever recorded an episode was about a year ago after watching a great horror film, Late Night with the Devil. I was so fired up at 1 in the morning. I came upstairs. That's what she said. But I went upstairs, sorry, and I recorded that episode. But tonight, I'm also fired up. It's been a crazy day, but that's not what I wanted to talk about. Talk? What we got to talk about? As Al Pacino famously says in Scarface. But a little trivia note, on this day 2008, a movie that I have a problem with, the film called 21, the movie starring Lawrence Fishburne, of somewhere around $35 million. The movie 21 grossed over 100. A dozen years earlier, I wrote a screenplay that was a fictional episode today is not really about the movie 21, which was adapted from Ben Misrich but Bringing Down the House was about a half dozen, I think, MIT students who turned themselves into professional level blackjack players. Now, as I talked about on the channel, MIT geniuses. I was just a random guy who did a lot of decades. I wasn't quite as sharp as him, but I was a better blackjack player, dare I say, than, sorry, Dad, than he ever would have been, because there were certain kinds of I was kind of at remedial level, maybe, not even. There were gaps in my ability to retain data, my ability to process data, the ability to do things like card counting. Well, I was, in the immortal words of Colin Farrell's Bullseye, I was magic. And that is not an exaggeration. But I stopped playing blackjack seriously in 1996, almost in another movie quote with Paul Newman, The Color of Money. It was over for me almost before it started. I barely got my feet under me as a card counter in Atlantic City, and already I was fucking up and getting shuffled up on and couldn't get a game anywhere. So my career was basically already over. I did not take care to not make certain kinds of what you would call rookie mistakes, which the guys in the film, version 21. They make some of them, but they don't make the fatal mistakes. And I don't mean that they're going to get murdered, but by fatal mistakes, meaning they're not going to be able to get a game anywhere in Vegas. So I wrote a screenplay in 1996 as I was still an undergrad at New York University. I was a year away from graduating. And I wrote a screenplay, and I titled it The Day of the Lamb. The Day of the Lamb. Now, I knew you're running up against people look at it and they wonder what it has to do with Silence of the Lambs. But my process for titling the screenplay The Day of the Lamb was, from a conceptual standpoint, when the average person goes into a casino, you could have a shit ton of money where if you drop $1 million, it's still okay. Although I don't care how rich you are, nobody likes to lose $1 million. You know, Michael Jordan, when he would go to Atlantic City and he got in trouble during the 93 playoffs, he would drop $1 million, but he'd come back the next night and he would win 2. So you have the money to lose, nobody likes to lose. But if you are a normal gambler, and you show up in Vegas, Atlantic City, Monte Carlo, wherever, the odds are you're going to lose if you are not doing something to tilt the odds in your favor. If you are not counting cards at Blackjack, or if you are not a good enough poker player where you can consistently defeat other, as my dad would say, 12 schmucks. In this case, if you could defeat the other 8 schmucks sitting at the table, and you win enough to overcome the fact that the house gets a vig of 1% or whatever, 2%, whatever the amount is, you can beat that game. Blackjack is the only game that you know that you can have a competitive advantage, that you can consistently get your money on the table when you have the advantage. So the reason why the script was called The Day of the Lamb, the first drafts were not that good. It was a kind of a cop film. The main character was a New York City cop who kind of moonlighted in Atlantic City playing big money blackjack. And the reason why it was called The Day of the Lamb, those who get fleeced like a lamb, or those who get slaughtered also like a lamb. And I don't mean the slaughtered lamb. It wasn't a reference to American Werewolf in London. I probably should have put that in there, but I didn't. Whoops. You have a lone card counter in there beating the shit out of this Atlantic City casino, a fictitious casino called the Golden Diamond. The Golden Diamond. There would be room for it now because some of the old school buildings are gone. Like the Sands is a parking lot. I'm not even sure if it is a parking lot. It's a vacant area, would be more accurate. So our intrepid protagonist, his name originally was Jay Watson. Not a great name. Not a great name. I couldn't figure out a better name. He beats the shit out of the casinos. They get mad. They try to take action against him. Somehow he defeats them. It wasn't really that exciting. The card counting stuff, the blackjack stuff was the only stuff that worked. The cop thriller action elements, I didn't really think them as far through as the other stuff. But the idea, the notion of The Day of the Lamb is everybody gets beat. Sooner or later, the casino have the advantage. But if you have a player with, let's just say, unlimited funds, and he is consistently getting his money on the table when he has a 3, 4, 6, 7% advantage, he's going to win. His victory is just as inevitable as the casino's. So I worked on this script. I had some feedback saying, you've got a lot of good elements in this, Jerry. You've got some good elements here. But the whole thing with if you're going to have the guy be a cop, there has to be a reason why he is a cop. He can't just be, and he's playing blackjack. You've got to do more with the concept. So I went underground, so to speak, for quite some time. And I worked on this script. I had other projects that were going on. This was even before I got involved in the Brooklyn Dodger screenplay, and way before I got involved in the Y.A. Tittle project. So I came up with this idea to kind of tie into the stuff that worked in the story, which was the Blackjack material. And there was a good twist where you think that the main character is a degenerate gambler who is throwing his life away. And then about halfway through the story, you realize he has been kicking the shit out of this casino. And they're just kind of getting wise to it. It's a little bit more intricate as far as, well, what do you mean getting wise to it? How did they not know that he was losing? The story already got into that. I figured out a way to do it so that it was at least somewhat believable. So I made these adjustments, and instead of having the casino manager be the villain, I created these two South Africans. I figured, you can be safe. Make the villains South Africans, just like in Lethal Weapon 2. It's always good. You want villains where people aren't going to get upset if you turn them into villains. Yeah, South Africans. So the main villain is a South African diamond smuggler. And his lady friend is world assassin number 1. So what does that have to do with a story of a cop who we think is a degenerate gambler playing blackjack? Well, glad you asked. This guy has a legitimate business. Jan Smith, or Jan. I never figured out there either. Was his name Jan or was his name Jan? Because I had it Jann, and I've seen that pronounced both ways. Didn't figure that name out either. Not a great name. But his cover, his actual business, he produces casino gaming paraphernalia. He supplies the Gold and Diamond with some of their materials that they use. He has stolen an enormous amount of diamonds in the world of my new updated screen. And the main character, the story is now set in 2 time periods. It's set present day, and it's set 6 months to a year earlier. The main character is involved in it with an international task force. They're trying to figure out, they know this guy, Smith, has about 15 million, nowadays would be more like 40 or maybe 50 million, in stolen diamonds that he's going to try to bring to the United States and have them fenced, and then he will sell them, and he will return home to South Africa, Johannesburg, and no one will be the wiser. That's the master plan. And the girlfriend, world's assassin number 1, who goes by the baby killer, but it's the baby killer. She looks like she's about 15. She's in her mid-20s. She looks like a baby. She looks like a kid. You don't want any part of her. If you see her, turn around and run away or try to hide. Don't engage her directly. You're going to be dead before you know it. She's the most dangerous person in the world. That's how she's presented. So the shit hits the fan with the task force. And when we resume the story, apparently the main character is in Atlantic City losing money. But he's not losing money. I kept the angle of he's kicking the crap out of the casinos. But he's doing it now for a specific reason. He believes that the casino is going to help the bad guy to bring the diamonds in. He just doesn't know how they're going to do it. And that's the substance of the drama, the fact that he's going to stop these people one way or another because, spoiler alert, as if this is ever going to get made, it isn't. His partner gets bumped off by the assassin. The sting blows up in everybody's face. They had a turncoat witness that went against them. Everything is it's just a terrible mess. So his partner's wife and kids, they're now fatherless. She's a widow. And he vows vengeance. And the only way he knows how to get vengeance is to get inside the casino, but doesn't do it in a conventional way, doesn't pretend to get a job there. He pretends to be a losing, loser, degenerate gambler. And he becomes buddies with the casino manager and asks questions in a very friendly and congenial way. And the casino manager has no idea that this guy is actually working undercover. But he figures, I'm working undercover. I'm not going to fucking lose. You think I'm just going to dump all this money? No. So the guy is like an amateur magician, and he's pocketing chips. And the casino, not really that good. They're not well trained enough. It's supposed to be a new casino. And they keep marking down that he lost his entire buy-in when he's winning tens of thousands of dollars more often than not. So that's basically my script. And it this version of it, which was a lot better than what I talked about, there's an FBI agent that you don't know is an FBI agent, and then there is another alphabet soup agent that you think is just a casino hostess. There's a lot of really, I think, cool stuff going on in the story, and a lot of it we don't know until very late as the plot twists just start to pile up, and we can't believe. I mean, again, if the script is grabbing you, you can't believe where it's going, because this doesn't seem like it's going to be this kind of story, but it turns into a story of vengeance, and how this one lone cop, he's an okay cop, but he's an intellectual. He's a guy who probably has 160 or 170 IQ. He's not indestructible. This isn't Dirty Harry. And when he faces off for the first time in the flashback sequence with World's Assassin #1, she's not able to kill him. She gets the drop on him, but she's unable to kill him. He outsmarts her. So she wants vengeance on him, but she killed his partner. He wants to kill her. Well, you can't kill her. Okay, well, here I am. Here I am. He all but advertises, why don't you come and get me? As Arnold Schwarzenegger said in Eraser, come and get me. You know, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here. You know where I live. Come and get me. He's not as well trained as her, but maybe he's a lot smarter. Maybe he is smarter than she thinks. So with all of this, all of these new changes to my script, you know, circa 1998, resubmitted it to my then agent at the time, a gentleman who unfortunately has since passed. Nice guy, brilliant guy. And he liked it. He sent it to someone he had worked with on a TV show, the TV show Wise Guy with Ken Wall. And this gentleman, who was a fairly high-level exec at CBS, he thought the script was terrific. He said, you know, I think, you know, need a little bit more work, but I like where this guy's head's at, and I like what he did here with this. These are twists. There's a lot of stuff in here I wasn't expecting. Whatever. He's glad handing them, throwing bouquets of praise, et cetera, et cetera. So this version of the script went out to various people in Hollywood. And there were a couple of months in like the summer of, maybe not quite the summer, the early part of 2000, maybe into the summer, where it looked like Chris O'Donnell, who was pretty big star at the time, it looked like he was going to do it. And there was a director, why am I forgetting the name of the director? This producer who thought he was going to get Chris O'Donnell also thought he could get Gregory Hoblit, the guy who had done the movie Fallen with Denzel, among others. So there were a couple of months where it looked like there was really going to be activity on this screenplay of mine, and it didn't happen. There weren't enough people who really loved the script. A lot of people talked about it's got huge potential. This would be a great movie if we could do it. I don't know how you can do it and not have the budget be out of control. These are the kinds of conversations that you have where you just, you know, your brain starts to check out because you know they're telling you we can't do this, or they're telling you they love it, but they're still saying no. And this is something that you learn, unfortunately, in the movie business. Most people don't want to burn bridges because if it comes back that you made a mistake, you don't want to look like an asshole. So usually people will nice you to death. They will tell you what they think you want to hear to keep a good feeling for them should you make it big or should this project go forward with somebody else. But ultimately, they turn it down. So O'Donnell ended up passing. He was working on Vertical Limit, and you know, he was busy. He was doing something else, the Kinsey movie. He was very busy during that era. So he passed, and I don't think Gregory Hoblit's people even ever got a look at the script. So the project temporarily was put on the back burner as activity with my Brooklyn Dodger script ramped up. You know, you try to focus on one thing at a time. And then I got involved in the Y.A. Tittle project later that year. So I mean, I wasn't happy that The Day of the Lamb didn't go, but I had all of these other things in the pipeline. It's not like I was crying myself to sleep. I was upset because it looked like, I mean, I was imagining Chris O'Donnell in the lead because the main character seems like a guy who's not paying attention. He seems like a very bland and dull guy for certain stretches of the story, but it turns out he's anything but. And I felt that O'Donnell's screen persona, very sort of workmanlike, straightforward, I thought it would have worked for this character. But it wasn't to be. And that project, the title of the script had a greater import in the revised drafts. It wasn't just the way that I explained it about, some lambs get fleeced and some get slaughtered, and then you have somebody who has an advantage, Day of the Lamb, whatever. There's a showdown. There is a moment, and it doesn't matter that I'm going to spoil this. There's a moment towards the end of the script where the hero is hopelessly outnumbered. He's survived numerous attempts on his life. He's a little bit like the Energizer Bunny. He's survived at least 3 separate assassination attempts, actually 4 in total. He's very, very smart. He's very clever, and he's super prepared. So he's in the casino. He's hopelessly outnumbered. He still doesn't know how the bad guy has gotten the diamonds in. He knows he's gotten them in, but he doesn't know how. He doesn't know where they are, because ultimately he needs to recapture these diamonds and arrest this fuck. But he doesn't know where they are. And there is a moment where about 3 or 4 plot threads converge within about, I don't know, a minute of, reading the script. And he and the bad guy, Smith or Smythe, they meet, like in Spaceballs, for the first time, for the last time. And these 2 guys are shaking hands. Each one thinks that he's about to kill the other. And they're shaking hands. And bad guy says to our intrepid hero, "You got about as much chance as a lamb in a slaughterhouse." And the main character squeezes his hand, probably breaks a couple of bones in his hands. He's one of those guys, he has an incredibly strong grip. He squeezes the guy's hand, and as the guy is yelping in pain and trying to get away from the grip, he just looks at him and goes, "The day of the lamb has come." And then it goes from there. It's pretty crazy. And I think it would have made entertaining film. It would have been a B movie. It would have been the sort of story that went straight to video. Maybe you have a supporting actor in a lead, something along those lines. Like maybe, he just recently passed away. Somebody like a Wings Hauser from the era, or even Mickey Rourke when he kind of dropped to the B list. It would have been something like that. But I always imagined, especially when the Brooklyn Dodgers screenplay didn't pan out, even though so many different people were interested at various points, and the Y.A. Tittle project just kept going up, and then that one blew up too. So I always held out hope that maybe someday I could do something with my script. But unfortunately, in about 2004, this book came out, Bringing Down the House, which has, nothing to do with anything that I did. Only from the idea of a story about blackjack players counting cards. That's it. Nobody copied anything from anybody else. And what the guys in the real story and in the book and in the movie, what they did, they formed teams. This is something that arguably the greatest blackjack player who ever lived, the late, great Kenneth Houston, he was also an MIT guy, I think, but he lived in Frisco. And he worked for the Pacific Stock Exchange. Ken Houston was probably a guy with a 180 or 190 IQ. He was an absolute genius. He was so good at blackjack that he was able to play and use the most advanced idiot count system, a level 4 count. I would say that if you're less than Albert Einstein, you have no business even attempting a level 4 count. Ken Houston mastered a level 4 count, and he could play at the level of a computer for hours while drunk as a skunk. With a blood alcohol level double the legal limit, he'd be slurring his words and making 0 mistakes. But the concept of team play, which is what they get into, and what the real guys from MIT, what they did was they had different people doing different things in the casino, and then you would have big players, meaning people whose job it was to show up when the count was high. It's one reason why if you're a blackjack player, you see a lot of tables that say no mid-shoe entry. It's not because people are paranoid and, it'll fuck up the flow of the cards. That's one of the great phrases I hated whenever anybody said, you'll fuck up the flow of the cards. Give me a fucking break. As if you know what cards are coming out. You don't. The flow of the cards. No, the no mid-shoe entry is so a big player can't come down and drop down a $10,000 bet with the count at plus 30 and with the players having about a 10% advantage. That's why there's no mid-show entry. Not because, well, they don't want to mess up the flow of the cards. Like the casino gives a shit. They're looking out for you. They're not. They're just trying to take your money. If they could pick you up, turn you upside down, and shake the change out of your pockets, that's exactly what they would do. No mid-shoe entry. But Ken Houston put together these card counting teams using the same concept, or I should say the MIT kids and Mickey Rosa, the guy that Spacey plays in the movie, they did the same thing. The kids there, they were not all big players. You had people betting minimums, and then they had signals like with baseball. You know, if you put your hand on your left arm, it means the count is plus 15 or higher. Get to the table and start betting $5,000 a hand. Some variation on that. Now, here's an irony. Ken Houston wrote a best-selling book called The Big Player. Hollywood optioned that book, and they spent 8 years trying to turn that book, which would read very similarly to Bringing Down the House by Ben Mesrich, 8 years of Hollywood trying to turn that into a movie, and I don't think it ever got out of pre-production at any major studio. I don't think they reached like the casting stage. They couldn't figure out how to do it. What do you do? Who's the, well, I guess Ken Houston himself would be the hero, but there were so many side characters and so many other things going on. It needed to be a mini-series. The way that he wrote the book, it's not a long book. I've read it at least 10 times cover to cover. It's just fascinating stuff. But Hollywood wasn't able to mount that production. I always imagined that I would be able to do something with this script, but I wasn't. And then, as I say, in about 2004 or 5, when Bringing Down the House was optioned, it was just a matter of time before they were going to turn that into a movie. And I know a lot of people who really liked it. The Rotten Tomatoes score is only 36%. It's not a good score, especially for a film with, let's just say it, dependable Oscar-caliber performers such as Lawrence Fishburne and especially Kevin Spacey. But I don't think the story's just not interesting enough as presented in the film. And when I think about Ken Houston's book, The Big Player, I don't think that movie would have been, I mean, it might have been successful because 21 was very successful. The studio would have signed up for a $152 million gross on a $35 million budget. That's fantastic, especially for a film that got mostly shitty reviews. I don't think I don't think Roger Ebert was still healthy at that time. I don't think that he liked it. I think he gave it thumbs down, and his partner, Richard Roeper, I don't recall any of the major critics giving it, a kind of a ringing endorsement. But that's really, that's the way that it goes. And my script it's never going to get made. And not really because of 21, but because it's such a niche kind of story. It took the fact that Mesrich's book was a bestseller. It was a runaway, massive nonfiction bestseller. So there was a built-in audience. There were people who were really interested in the idea of, wait a minute, you really can beat Blackjack just by using your brain, by studying card counting and figuring out yes, and yes is the answer to all those questions. So 21 released 17 years ago today, a shockingly wide and large box office hit. Not a great movie, but a film that I will always look at and wonder if my script had ever been made, would they have made it more like that? Would they have de-emphasized the crime thriller aspects and the fact that the story was told in a Pulp Fiction structure? It was deliberately told out of sequence. The idea is, in the first 15 minutes or 15 pages of the script, there are all these questions being thrown at the reader, and you say to yourself, I don't understand this. It's put together like a puzzle that you have to put together piece by piece. They probably, whoever that they would have been, would have changed all that, and maybe they would have only focused on just how good a blackjack player this guy is. Maybe he would have not even been a cop. Maybe he would have been doing something else, and it would have been closer to 21 where there's elements of danger, but it is not, strictly speaking, I would not call it a crime thriller, even though there are people engaging in criminal behavior and not the kids who are counting cards. But that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. I wanted to talk about the movie 21, my kind of a little bit off-kilter personal connection to the story, and the legendary Kenneth S. Houston, the greatest blackjack player who ever lived, who had a similar series of experiences over a period of years putting together card counting teams. And I guarantee you The guys at MIT not only read that book, but that was the model they used to put together their teams that went to Vegas and just kicked the shit out of them up and down the Strip and the downtown and Tahoe. They just smashed those guys. And just like Danny DeVito says in The Rainmaker when he says there's nothing like nailing an insurance company. Hey, who doesn't love a story of underdogs beating Atlantic City, Vegas, Monte Carlo, or anywhere? 17 years ago today, 21 opened. Would have liked to have gotten my script made, and it certainly want to reboot The Matrix and figure out how they could have possibly made Ken Houston's the big player in the mid-1980s. This has been episode 480 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your late Friday, possibly almost even into early Saturday morning here with me in New York. But if you checked out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon.